Hi guys. So what you're being asked to do up here is look at a sentence and decide, are there parts of it that are independent and parts that are dependent? Now, not all of the sentences in these examples will have both, but you're looking to see if you can find it. Remember, independent. Think of the word. It's got a subject and a verb. To be independent, it means it can stand on its own. It doesn't need the help of anything else in the sentence. Dependent has a subject and a verb. However, it's dependent on more information. It doesn't make sense on its own. So if we look at this first example, my friend from school easily gets mad when he is hungry. I crossed out the prepositional phrase from school because I want it out of my way so it doesn't interfere with anything. My friend is the subject, and then easily gets mad could be our verb phrase. If I walked up to someone, I could say, my friend easily gets mad, makes sense on its own. However, on the other side, we have the dependent clause. We have a subject and a verb in here. He is, but I couldn't just walk up to someone and say, hey, when he is hungry, you're waiting for more information. It's dependent. So some sentences are going to have independent clauses and dependent clauses within them. Your job is going to be to look for the two parts. So if we look at number 1, Jim studied. We have a subject, we have a verb. I crossed out in the lab for his chemistry quiz because we have 2 prepositional phrases. So we got those out of the way. If you labeled these as dependent, that's fine. They are dependent. They're dependent on the rest of the information, the first part. But I crossed them out because they're prepositional phrases. Now, the second one is an example of sentences are not always going to have dependent clauses within them. I crossed out the from her, the prepositional phrase, but my professor is intelligent, makes sense on its own. It's got a subject, it's got a linking verb. Then we look over here, I learned a lot. We've got a subject, we've got a verb. It makes sense on its own. So both sides are independent and they're brought together with the comma and the fanboy. If we look here, I didn't study. We have a subject, we have a verb. You can walk up to someone and say, I didn't study. It makes sense. It's independent. However, the second part, this is tricky because it's got a subject and a verb. Because I forgot the exam was today, it sounds like a response. However, it is not complete on its own. So if you remember from last unit, this is actually an adverb clause, the because. So look out for those as well. This one, vests, which were once popular, have been less popular for several years. For several years is my prepositional phrase that I got out of the way. And then we have an adjective clause, which were once popular, in the middle here. And that is dependent. We couldn't just walk up to someone and say, which were once popular. Doesn't make sense. We could say vests, subject, have been less popular. That's independent. So look out for those clauses that we learned about last unit, adverb and adjective clauses. Those are going to be dependent. Now the next part, what you're being asked to do is identify subjects and verbs. I want you to get in the habit of that, and then also looking for punctuation depending on what kind of clause it is. So if we look at the first one, they were there early. We have a subject, they. We have the verb, were. That's our linking verb. We look at the other side. They, subject, got, verb, really good seats. Both sides are independent. Both sides can stand on their own. Neither of them are dependent clauses. They need a comma and a fanboy to be brought together. Whereas if we look at the third one that I did for an example, we, subject, didn't go, crossed out to practice because prepositional phrase. We didn't go to practice today. That's an independent clause. It makes sense on its own. However, the second part, because our meet ran late yesterday, that's dependent. It needs the information from the first part because we're not going to walk up to someone and say, because our meet ran late yesterday. It's not complete. So because it's a dependent clause, we don't bring it together with a comma and a fanboy, so I labeled it as no comma. All right, number 1, the hill, subject, was, linking verb, covered. I crossed out with wildflowers because we have prepositional phrases. It, subject, was, linking verb, a beautiful sight. Both of those sides make sense on their own. They're independent. We're going to bring them together with a comma and a fanboy. This one, you are allowed to have 2 subjects sometimes. The sentence is not just about the mother or just about the sister. It's about both. My mother and sister, subject, what do? Bake, verb, every evening. Independent clause. They, subject, enjoy, verb, eating it later. Independent clause. We bring it together with a comma and a fanboy. Subject of this one, the crabgrass was, linking verb, flourishing, makes sense on its own, independent clause. The rest of the lawn is a prepositional phrase, was, linking verb, was dying. The rest of the lawn was dying. Independent clause. We brought it together with a comma and a fanboy. Number 4, Italy, subject, is, linking verb. Italy is my favorite country, independent clause. I, subject, plan, verb. I plan to spend 2 weeks there next year. Independent clause. We're going to bring it together, the 2 independent clauses together with a comma and a fanboy. And then the very last one, they, subject. Now again, kind of like number 2, you can, just like you can have 2 subjects, you can have 2 verbs. Studied and rewarded are both the things that are happening. So they is our subject. What did they do? They studied and rewarded themselves. This is our independent clause. Makes sense on its own. Now the second part, we have an adverb clause, if you remember from last unit. After they received an A. Again, I can't walk up to somebody and say, after they received an A, you're waiting for more information. It's dependent. Since it's dependent, we do not bring it together with a comma and a fanboy. No comma, stays just the way it is. And if you remember from last unit, if an adverb clause comes second, there's our hint word for adverb clauses, no comma. So this was a pretty complicated practice. It was hard. Hopefully you got some right. If you did not, that's okay. It was just a practice. We'll continue to work on it.